Real estate is one of the biggest financial transactions you'll ever make. And unfortunately, that makes it a prime target for scammers. Fake wire instructions, phony listings, impersonated professionals. Today, Legacy Title Agency is showing you how to spot real estate scams before they cost you time, money, or your peace of mind. We want you to be safe. So whenever we're talking about real estate scams, there's really two main types of scams that we see in today's market. The first are impersonations, and the second kind are where there's some sort of diversion of funds. So let's talk about that first kind, impersonations. So usually the person that is being impersonated is the seller because they own the property. So someone is pretending to be the seller. So pay attention to what are the sellers doing? Where are they? How are they communicating? Things like that. If it seems a little off, it's probably a red flag. The next thing we look at is the offer itself, right? Does it seem too good to be true? Well, it might just be too good to be true. Is there a really great steal of a deal and things like that? We probably want to look into that because this is a pretty solid market. We're not getting properties for steals right now. Another common red flag, something we should look out for, is if that seller or our scammer doesn't want to meet in person. Maybe they have never met their real estate agent, they're out of state, they're out of country. That's just something that we commonly hear. The next one is that the seller doesn't want to complete an ID verification. For whatever reason, their phone doesn't work, the software isn't working for them, they don't have a way to complete this ID verification, or they just don't want to. They don't believe in it because they think it's too invasive or something to that effect. Our scammers are usually declining ID verification. The other thing you can look at is language cadence or their word choices. Read the emails. If it sounds just a little bit off or a little bit too formal, or maybe the word choices just aren't reading quite right, that's a really good indicator that either there's AI creating these emails or it's someone who's trying to get away with something. The next two are really important, and these are more the types of properties that these scammers are targeting. They're targeting vacant land and non-owner occupied, usually meaning it's a rental property with a tenant. Why is that? It's because it's easier for this scammer to sell these vacant properties or these tenant-occupied properties because the seller isn't living there. So maybe if you as a buyer are looking at this vacant land or looking at this rental unit, that's not really going to raise a red flag to a seller who lives in their property, who would be like, what the heck is this buyer trying to look at my property for? I'm not trying to sell it, right? So vacant land and non-owner occupied properties, such as properties that are rented out to tenants, are also appealing because once that scammer who's pretending to be the seller does successfully sell the property, the true seller isn't going to be notified immediately that someone is maybe looking at that vacant land or looking at the property, because we know that the buyer is probably not going to be moving into and putting a tent on vacant property the day after the closing, right? Or maybe they're not anticipating kicking out the tenant the day after closing. So these two types of properties are really high risk because it's much easier for scammers to be successful. Another really common red flag we see are these scammers want to close super fast. They're kind of excited. Usually they say they have a reason why they have to close very fast and they're trying to close just as quickly as possible. Part of that is because they're trying to get away with this scam. And the other part is they want everyone to be moving very quickly so that hopefully people will overlook some small details and they'll be able to get away with a little bit more. Along with those lines is also that scammer wants to sign their documents either remotely, meaning not in the same vicinity as the buyer, or they want to use their own notary. Maybe they have a quote unquote trusted banker who's willing to notarize all of their documents. It's going to allow them to also forge those notarized documents as well, such as our deed. So, most importantly, how do we prevent scammers from impersonating sellers and scamming us out of our hard-earned money, right? Well, first and foremost, we've got to lean into the technology that is working for us. We mentioned that most scammers do not want to actually go through with and complete third-party identity verifications. So making sure that those identity verifications are done. Most title companies at this point will have multiple different software platforms that they can use. So if a seller says, oh, this platform isn't working for me, they should have a backup software platform that we can try and we can really problem solve so we can make sure that third-party identity verification gets done. So we can feel very confident that the person sitting in front of us at the closing table is in fact the seller. That's really the biggest fail-safe to make sure that the seller is truly the seller and not a scammer. This is one of the fastest rising areas of title insurance claims. And when we say that, a lot of times people say, well, I'm not too worried about seller fraud because we just said it's a common insurance claim. So my title insurance will protect me from seller fraud. Well, we do a lot of things to try to prevent seller fraud for sure. Like we ask important questions, we ask our clients to complete identity verifications and things like that. But on the off chance that a seller fraud does slip through the cracks, maybe because the title company waived a condition or allowed a party to go to closing without that ID verification. In that circumstance, if there was a claim that got paid, the buyer still is out the property, right? The buyer wired the money, the money has already gone to the seller, and this is going to be a whole big mess that has to be unraveled. And you can imagine that's obviously if it closes. If it doesn't close, right, and we realize at the closing table that the seller isn't really who they say they are, it's not going to close. And so we also are going to try to identify those scammers early on in the transaction. So the buyers and the real estate agents and everybody hasn't spent a ton of time wasted, only to find out that unfortunately this person doesn't even own this property. So it's important that we're looking out for these things. So the second type of real estate scam that we've got to watch out for is scammers who are trying to divert our money to them instead of to the seller. So usually the scammers are targeting buyers and trying to convince the buyer to wire their money instead of to the title company to them. And the way that they do this is they usually reach out to the buyer and they say, hey, we are the title company. And by the way, we changed our wire instructions. Don't send the money to the place we originally told you to send it. Instead, send it to us over here. This is a very, very common scam we see, and we know that we should not trust this, right? The title company's wire instructions are not going to change. So what are some of our best practices? Don't accept wire instructions just out of the blue via an email. Use the portal, use a phone, pick it up, call the title company. Sometimes they have a voicemail recording that says, these are our wire instructions, and it will repeat it for you. You can even stop by the title company and ask for a copy of those wire instructions. Or best practice is do a couple of those, call, confirm them, use the voicemail, do any combination of those. There's another thing that title companies do now, since this is such a common scam, and that is most title companies use a very special bank that just works with title companies. And the reason being, when you as a buyer are trying to wire your funds to the title company, your bank, when you're standing in front of your teller and you're saying, hey, send my money to this title company over here, you're going to give them a routing number and an account number. Your bank is only going to be able to verify the routing number, not the account number. And the routing number is going to tell you what bank that money is going to. The account number is going to tell you who the account holder is. So if I'm trying to wire my money to Legacy Title, and Legacy banks with Wells Fargo, who has account holders all over the world, my bank teller is going to be able to say, oh, I see that your money is going to go to Wells Fargo, but they're not going to be able to confirm that the account number I gave them is for Legacy Title or if it's for Bob Jones down the street, right? Now, on the flip side, if we use a very specialized bank that only allows title companies or other financial institutions to hold accounts there, what will happen is now you walk to your bank and you say, I want to wire funds to Legacy Title. And they say, okay, great. We see that these funds are going to Bank United. We can't confirm that they're going to Legacy Title, but we know that they're going to Bank United. And what we know is Bank United only allows financial institutions and title companies to hold bank accounts there. So that's actually a pretty safe transfer because worst case scenario, our money is going to end up at a different financial institution who is still held by very strict standards. They're not going to hopefully disappear in the middle of the night like maybe Bob Jones down the street can. So that's a pretty cool thing that most title companies have switched over to help protect our buyers. So make sure that you're verifying with your bank when you're wiring funds, you're giving them that routing number, make sure that it's matching the bank name that your title company gave you. And just as an FYI, we're saying that most of the time the scammers are going to target a buyer's money, but it's also starting to happen where the scammers are trying to divert seller funds as well. And they're trying to defraud the title companies and say, hey, we know that Sam the seller was just at a closing. So we're going to call up the title company and pretend to be Sam the seller and tell them that, oh, we don't want our money to go to our one bank account anymore. We now want it to go to this other bank account. So title companies should also be verifying seller wire instructions. And most title companies are not going to allow a seller to change their wire instructions after a closing without some sort of series of verifications to confirm that this isn't a scammer trying to steal that seller's money. Again, most title companies aren't going to accept any changes to wire instructions via email. They're going to want some interaction with the seller, probably through a portal or a phone call or something to that effect. And as a friendly reminder, it's very hard to recover wires if they have been lost. So it's absolutely best practice to be very careful on the front end and make sure that we are being as proactive as possible. So regardless of being a buyer or a seller, we should all be on the lookout to make sure that our closings are handled safely and securely. Make sure that your title company is following the best practices, a bunch of which we talked about earlier. It may feel like we're jumping through hoops at closing to make sure we get to the table, but that is a good thing. We want our closings to be secure and we want there to be a lot of checks and balances. Remember that Legacy Title is here to lead the way on safe and secure closings. Feel free to give us a call or an email with any questions.